There is a massive debate amongst FSU fans right now, and it all centers around which game is more important in 2023 for the Noles. LSU in Orlando or Clemson in Death Valley. Go ahead, do me a favor, before you even watch the video, comment below which one is more important for the Seminoles in 2023. Richie, my guy, joining me today so that we can have this chat, so we can have this debate. We'll tell you something you may not realize in just a moment. But Richie, let's jump right into it. LSU is the Sunday of Labor Day. Clemson 3 weeks later up in Death Valley. Start us off. Which game is more important?
For me, TJ, it's definitely LSU. I just think being the opener to set the tone for the season is a huge deal. You lose that game, and now you need to win 12 straight just to have a chance to get to the college football playoff. And winning 12 games in a row in a college football season is very difficult to do. I just think, as it stands right now, LSU is a huge game. You win that game, and even if you lose in Death Valley Junior, I guess we could call it, you're fine, right? Because you're getting a rematch with Clemson, most likely. I don't see anybody else running the table in the ACC to knock you out of the ACC championship game. I just think LSU sets the tone, in my opinion, the most important game of the season.
So, as we show some of the highlights from last year's game, obviously a ton of fun that we had there in New Orleans. It's a little frustrating this game is in Orlando. We've whined about that some, and we've complained about that some for sure. And I completely get what you are saying there. I get your thoughts. I'm going to go the other way in just a minute, but you are right about the fact of all of the hype and all of the buildup leading up to the season. I think even last year there were a little bit lower expectations on Florida State. We were all predicting like 7-8 wins. You could go in and you could potentially find a way to beat LSU, but I think anybody in Nole Nation would have been, with a 3-point loss or keeping it close or something, would have ended up saying like, oh yeah, we just got beat by a better team. Like, no, not no big deal, but hey, it's not the same level of expectation. And so from that perspective, I can see what you're saying. And I don't know that I agree fully. We'll talk about it here in a moment, but I do think from the perspective of, man, you've got all of this hype and all of these expectations heading into the season. And if you drop that game, where does the team's head go? Where do their minds end up? You're obviously going to be playing Southern Miss on a short week the very next week. I think we've seen what has happened with an emotional loss and how that carried over a couple of years ago to a lesser opponent. Southern Miss, not as easy of a cupcake as you normally would want. They are a good quality team. Considering their level, considering where they're at. And so I do think from that perspective, the team kind of holding it together. And now I will say this, and that's not a slam on the team. I think Mike Norvell does a really good job of having this team rebound from losses. I thought they rebounded from all 3 losses really, really well last year. I thought they did a good job coming out, starting the NC State game after losing to Wake. I thought they started the Clemson game really well after losing to NC State. They didn't finish and they didn't win those games, but there was no hangover. I don't think it was like, oh, one loss led to another. So I don't worry about that a ton, but with all those expectations, with all that hype for the national championship, the playoff, winning the ACC, everything else, are you able to keep your mind and your mental state high after losing that game? I'd like to say yes. I'd like to say that I believe in the team and I believe in Mike Norvell and this staff to get that done. But I do think that that's a valid consideration, a valid concern with losing that LSU game to start the year.
Yeah, and I think you hinted at it, TJ, but any other year prior, I would agree with you, it's Clemson. Because if you lose to Clemson, you're out of the ACC championship game, right? That's not the case this year because the ACC has done away with divisions. The 2 best records in the ACC will play in Charlotte for the ACC title game. Coming on to your side a little bit, if you do beat Clemson, there's a chance you may not have to play him again, depending on what happens in the rest of the ACC season. But I think that's a huge factor for my reasoning, being LSU is the most important game. I just think, that will be the most watched college football game in the entire month of September. Unless maybe Florida State wins that game and they do play Clemson, they're undefeated. That has a chance. Florida State could have the 2 most watched football games in the entire month of September, but we know that LSU game is going to be up there. I just think that the fact that there's no divisions plays a big role in my mindset as to why I think LSU is probably the more important game right now. But man, what one thing we can say, Florida State fans, by the end of September, we're going to know what goals are still on the table for this football team.
Yeah, where the team is, what the trajectory is for sure. Okay, I'm going to go the other direction. I'll tell you why I think Clemson is the more important game. I think you make some good points, but I'm going with Clemson here. We didn't script this out. We didn't say like, oh, let's both take one. We were literally just arguing in a group chat the other day, and I said, hey, let's make a video out of this. So this is not staged. This is not, no part of this is like, oh, TJ's just playing the bad guy or whatever. No, like we truly just disagree here. Just before I do that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Gramco. Gramco is a Delta 8 company based in the great state of Florida. Here in Florida, you can get all of their exclusive products, all of their great stuff, whether it's gummies, vapes, pre-rolls, wake and bake coffee, whatever you're looking for, you can get it all for 25% off by using code TJ25 at checkout. Again, TJ25 at thegramco.com. We've tailgated with them. We've hung out with them. They're great people. They also have a CBD line called Sativadol, Sativadol, Sativadol.com, where you can go and get all of your CBD needs taken care of. Make sure that you're supporting people that are giving back to the channel. They take care of us, so you guys take care of them. Thegramco.com. Get you some of those blue raspberry gummies. They are elite. Maybe try one at a time to start. But good stuff there from Gramco. Appreciate them. Make sure you guys support. Okay, so here's why I think it's more important for it to be Clemson. The number one goal this year. And I understand what our aspirations are. I understand where we want to get to. I understand the battle's end is hashtagging everything with going for it all in 2023. And I am right on with that. I believe all of it. I'm good with it. Here's why I think it's got to be Clemson. Because you have to win the ACC. And if you lose to Clemson, there is a chance that you don't make that ACC championship game. And I think that makes your season a little bit of a disappointment. Now, you go 11-1 and you backdoor into the college football playoff and you don't win the ACC. It wouldn't be a disappointment at that point. But there's a chance that if you lose to Clemson, you don't make the ACC championship. And maybe that's Louisville. Maybe that's another team that does run the table. I'm not predicting that. Again, I kind of agree with Richie. I don't think another team would. I think that Florida State would likely get in even with a loss. But because you remove that, or because you basically invent that chance, I think that you've got to beat Clemson, and that has to be the more important game. There's also just been a dominance that Clemson's had over you since 2015, and it's time to take that back. Losing to LSU in week one, I mean, we know how the ESPN and the College Football Playoff love the SEC. I'm not sure if losing to or beating an SEC team is better for you or worse for your resume with quality losses and everything else that ESPN and the College Football Playoff throw in there. So it might even be better for you to lose to LSU and you beat them last year and everybody just talks about how that win wasn't very impressive. So maybe if you lose to them, you can get some respect around here. But no, somewhat in jest, I think that's got to be a little bit more important. The other side of that is you lose to Clemson, you may not make it. Man, you beat Clemson and they may not make it, right? You beat them and they have a much tougher ACC schedule than we do, in my opinion, in my estimation. They have to play against NC State. They have to play against UNC. Florida State doesn't have to play against either one of those teams. And Clemson has to play Duke week one. Now, I think Duke was a little overhyped. I know they won 9 games last year, but I don't think they were quite as good as they should have been. I will tell you, in their 4 losses, they lost those 4 games all by 1 score and by a combined 16 points. So Duke was not a terrible team last year. They were a good team. I know that's kind of funny, but here's where it could come into play. They return a lot of talent, and Clemson's obviously starting a brand new quarterback. So maybe Duke catches them early. If they have a loss to Duke and a loss to us, maybe they don't even make the ACC championship. And avoiding a rematch with Clemson would be phenomenal if you win that first game. If we beat Clemson in Death Valley, I am worried about a rematch. Rematches haven't been kind to us in the past. I don't want to play them a second time. So potentially knocking them out of the contention for the ACC championship, because maybe they drop to Duke or maybe they drop to UNC or somebody like that, would be ideal in my book. Again, you lose, no guarantee you go to Charlotte. You win, you might knock them out. I don't know. Again, you could certainly see it either way, but that's why I've got Clemson. So thoughts there, Rich?
Yeah, and I might contradict myself a little bit here, but if I could pick one guaranteed win right now between LSU and Clemson, I'm taking Clemson, right? I just said LSU's the most important game, and I do think that. But yeah, that Clemson game is huge because here's the thing. If you win that game, you can afford to slip up at Pittsburgh late in the season, right? And that's a game that I'm actually a little concerned about. I'm more concerned about playing at Pittsburgh than I am playing against Florida or Miami this season. And I think that's where it, comes into play for me. Like you said, the ultimate goal, that Florida State every year has 3 goals: state championship, conference championship, national championship, right? I think the state championship, you have a really good chance of winning that. But to your point, TJ, and I'm staying with LSU, but if you don't beat Clemson in Death Valley, it makes your chances of getting an ACC championship that much more difficult.
Yeah. All right. So if I'm trying to see things your way, and I'm going to give you the credit and say like kind of where you may have swung me to your way, I still think I'm with Clemson, but if I'm swinging back your way on it, the big counterpoint that I think you bring up with that is if you lose to Clemson and you do make the ACC championship, I don't think they want us in a rematch either. No. I'll just tell you that. Like, just as much as we're saying, like, oh, man, we beat them, and then we got to play them again. Like, first year with no divisions, we finally, like, they've had it easy all these years in the ACC championship, getting to play somebody out of the horrible, awful Coastal, and then we beat them, and we got to play them again. I think they'd think the same thing. I think that, having a loss in Death Valley and getting a chance to avenge that loss later in the year with your win against LSU that you've got earlier, plus a pretty unblemished ACC record, would certainly be a de facto a trip to the playoff if you were able to win it, for either team. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, maybe we backdoor this thing and go 11-1 and sneak in that way. I don't think that's impossible. I think if you were to miss Charlotte, say Louisville has an out of conference loss and an in-conference loss, but they get in over us based on some weird tiebreaker or what. I don't even really know what that tiebreaker would be if both of us had a conference loss and Clemson didn't. But say Louisville gets in and they take their 3rd loss in Charlotte, and we're sitting there at 11-1 with a 3-point loss on the road to Clemson and win over a good LSU team that I expect to be in Atlanta as well. You can maybe backdoor your way into the playoff that way. Okay, Richie, we've talked about what's more important. I want to talk about history here in just a moment, but before we do that, what's your record coming out of September? I think this is a pretty easy answer, and I know what I'm going to give. We'll probably be the same here, but what do you think our record is?
Yeah, I think it's 3-1. I think you split LSU and Clemson. I'm not sure which one. I'd really like Florida State to beat LSU, so I guess I'm taking that loss to Clemson, but I think 3-1 is what we're looking at. But, man, don't let us go 4-0 because then the hype train is full steam ahead.
Yeah, it'll be pretty ridiculous if we're at that point of the 4-0 record out of September. I think at that point you'd have Florida State comfortably in your top 3. I think they would have moved up to there by that point. I still think Georgia would be at 1. I think one of your Big Ten teams would probably be at 2, but Florida State at 3 would not shock me. Florida State at 2 at that point wouldn't shock me. 2 top 10 wins would be certainly impressive. I got 3-1 as well. I think that when we do our season predictions, I think they'll be pretty boring because I think I'm gonna predict us to go 11-1, and the loss is pretty apparent with where it'll be. But I think 3-1 would be really good. I think that'd be a great result for Florida State because your toughest 2 games being in September, being able to get out of that, splitting them, still being very much alive for the ACC, very much alive for the playoff would be pretty impressive. Based on history, over the last 10 years, the winner of this matchup has a greater than 90% chance of winning the conference. Only one time in the last 12 years has a team other than FSU or Clemson won this conference. 2021, obviously, Wake and Pitt played for it. So the winner of this game wins the conference more than 90% of the time. That is why I'm going to stick with and land on Clemson. Florida State has based on history again, a 90+% chance to win the ACC if they're able to beat Clemson. Now, that is with divisions, so it does get tougher this year if there's a rematch, but I'm going with Clemson there. I just can't wait for the season to get here. Talking about these games, watching these highlights that Harlan's playing for us while we're debating it and going back and forth. Both games were great last year. I know that the middle of the Clemson game kind of got away from us, but both games were a lot of fun, and I expect them both to be even better. We will drop tailgate info for the LSU game this week, maybe next, but probably this week. So stay tuned for that. Richie, anything before we get out of here?
No, I just talking about this has me so excited for the month of September because, man, that is going to be a fun ride for Florida State fans.
Yeah, going to be great. Make sure that you're supporting our friends over at Gramco. Appreciate them for their support. If you haven't joined our Discord, make sure that you join that as well. We discuss football at all hours. I was up using the restroom the other day at like 3 a.m. and people were talking about FSU football in there. So there's people that are way crazier than us that keep that thing going. Almost up to 2,000 members, so that's cool. Go check us out. If you missed our video on why FSU is looking to leave the ACC and why there might be a really, really clear path to do so, you can click the video on the screen right now.